Today is all about stories. I try to tell stories from my personal life in every video, but today is just a bunch of stories. That's pretty much it. It's not about any book that I read. It's not about anything else. Just a bunch of stories from my life. And it starts with two lessons that I learned from my parents. One from my dad and one from my mom. And then some other stories later on in life that tie into what they told me. So the two lessons that I got from my parents helped me through some things now, and I'll explain all that as I go. But the first story is that when I think I was like 16, I went to high school in this little teeny tiny farm town called Melba, Idaho. It's a town of like 600 people. Like my graduating class had like 60 people or something like that. And so pretty much like all of my jobs in the summer were working in fields and the farms and doing things like that. I started doing that when I was like 14, and then through high school I just worked in the fields. And we had 5 acres, and my dad liked to restore things like motorcycles and cars, and so moving to Melba, he said, I need to get a tractor and restore it. So he got the super old tractor. I can't remember even what make or model it was, but he restored it and put this brand new super fancy paint job on it, and it was pretty cool. But we had all these poplar trees in this row that was probably 100 feet long, and every year for some reason a bunch of them would die. They were all pretty close together, which probably wasn't healthy, but so some of them would die every year. And so my dad decided that the work we were going to do this Saturday was to pull down all the dead poplar trees. I'd never done that before. I had very limited experience on a tractor. I'd never pulled trees out with a tractor, so none of us really knew what we were doing, but I was designated the tractor driver, and my cousin Brock was there. He and I are the same age. We grew up together. Me and Brock had the job of pulling out these trees while my dad did other stuff, whatever. So we weren't really supervised. We didn't even know what we were doing. And so we pulled a few out, and we put the chain really low on these trees, as low as we could, because we figured the higher up you put the chain, the more likely it would to pull towards you. So we would put it on the very bottom of the tree, hoping that it would break the stump off like this and then fall backwards. That was our 16-year-old logic, or however old we were. We didn't know what we were doing, like I said. But that worked for the first, 4 or 5 trees, however many trees. But then we got to this bigger one, and I remember the base was, maybe 8 inches in diameter. And so we put the chain really low on the tree, and I'm cranking with this tractor, and we weren't going anywhere. In fact, the front wheels kept lifting off the ground. It was pulling too hard. So inch by inch, we'd move it up a little bit, up the trunk of this tree, to try to get more leverage on it to break it off. And so we went higher and higher, inch by inch, and it kept doing the same thing. It wouldn't go anywhere. And so I don't remember how high we moved it, but we got it up to a point. It was probably only like 2 feet off the ground. It wasn't very high, but anyway, we moved it up to a point where I started cranking with the tractor, and it finally broke off. And the next thing that I remember, I was falling off the tractor, or about to fall off the tractor, and I had to reach over and grab the wheel and pull myself back up before I hit this power pole ground that I was headed straight for. The tractor was going straight for it. So I pull myself back up onto the tractor, and I shut it off before I hit the power line, or the ground, the electric ground, whatever. And then I noticed the shock kind of went away, and I noticed that my head was throbbing and I had blood coming down my face, and I had no idea what happened. I just knew that all of a sudden I was pulling a tree out, and then all of a sudden I was falling off the tractor, and I had to pull myself back up and turn off the tractor really fast. And I think Brock had already made it over to me, came running, and my mom was outside somewhere too, and Brock yelled at her that what had happened, and she ran over, and my dad and everybody. And so, if you can guess what happened, we moved the chain up so high on this tree to get it to break off that when it did, it fell off, and then it snapped down right over my head. The tree, I don't know how tall it was or how thick the tree was where it actually broke over me, but I think it was a few inches, So big poplar tree just came crashing down and broke over my head and knocked me out. It knocked me out, and I almost fell off the tractor. And it could have been much worse. If I would have fallen off the tractor, it would have been really bad. So I was lucky, or whatever, that I didn't. Anyway, so they helped me over to a chair that we set up outside, and my mom did her motherly thing, and she cleaned me up, and making sure I was okay and stuff. I had this huge knot, this big goose egg right here. I still have a scar. I have like a permanent bump and a scar right here, where it hurt me the worst. Anyway, so my head's just throbbing and I'm bleeding, I'm gushing blood, you know. Everybody's kind of freaking out. My dad's just totally calm, kind of laughing about it because I was okay, you know, I wasn't dead or whatever, so he's kind of over there chuckling a little bit. And anyway, after a while, you know, I get all cleaned up and I'm kind of drink a bunch of water and whatever. And my dad comes over, you know, and I'm sitting on a chair, so he comes over and he goes, so you're okay? I said, yeah, I guess so. I think I'm okay. He goes, all right, well, there are a bunch more trees we need to pull out, so let's go get them out. I was like, I didn't even know what to say to that. Like, I you know, it's like a freaking tree just broke over my head. Like, I'm done pulling those out of the ground. Like, I'm not getting back up there. I'm not doing that again. And that hurt a lot. Like, I don't want to go back up on the tractor and do that again. And anyway, he let me kind of sit around and do whatever for a while. But after a little bit, I realized that I was okay. Like, I didn't have the symptoms of a concussion, and I wasn't dead. My skull wasn't cracked open. My body wasn't broken. And so I was okay. And so we actually did. I ended up going back to work, and we kept pulling the trees out differently, not the same way, but we did it anyway. But we kept working, and we kept pulling trees out. So that's the first story. That's the first lesson that I learned from my dad. That in a crisis situation, he asked me if I was okay after something happened, and I wanted it. I don't know. I wanted it to be a bigger deal than it was. It wasn't a big deal. It broke over my head. Tractor didn't crash. I didn't run into the power thing. I didn't have a concussion. My body wasn't broken. Everything was okay. But I wanted it to be a bigger thing than it was. But I was okay. That's all my dad had to say, and that stuck with me forever. And I'll talk about how that ties in. The second story was with my mom. So if you watch my first video about the slight edge, I talked about how I served a mission for the LDS Church, which was 2 years, and I was in Italy. And I had to have been a little over a year that I'd been there. I think it was, anyway, around the year mark, so about the halfway mark. And it was in the summer, and I don't know about you, but for me, when I smell, the smells bring back tons of memories, really vivid memories. And I never really got homesick while I was gone. You know, we were always busy doing stuff, and I just never really got homesick. But I remember this one summer, man, we were on our bikes. We were almost always on bikes or foot. We didn't have a car to drive around or anything. So I was in the city of Livorno, Italy, and we rode our bikes past this movie theater. And normally we don't really smell it, but for some reason, and by the way, as a missionary, you're not allowed to go to movies, like to movie theaters or whatever. It's one of the rules. So you don't go to those. So for a year, I hadn't been to a movie. But at home, I love to go to movies. I love to, watch movies and eat popcorn and everything. So super hot. We're riding our bikes past, all sweaty and nasty. And for some reason, we'd ridden. By the way, this street was like the main street. Like we went past this movie theater almost every day. Never smelled it before. Never had anything happen before. But the doors were open, and for some reason, this huge draft of super cold air came out and just blasted us. And it just smelled like a movie theater. It smelled like popcorn and cold air, air conditioning, whatever. And it hit me so hard. It made me so homesick. Like the smell of a movie theater made me so homesick that it was hard for me to keep doing missionary stuff the rest of the day. Like I was so homesick. And the missionary slang for that is trunky. I don't know why. Maybe it's, I don't know why that term exists, but that's what you call somebody that's homesick. You call them trunky. Like, oh, you getting a little trunky? So anyway, I was trunky. And I was really homesick. And I didn't know what to do about it. Same day, so I told about the story in Melville where we had 5 acres. Well, we had 2 acres of grass, of grass that we had to maintain and mow. So it was my job. It took me like 4 hours every Saturday to mow our lawn. And I hated it at the time because it would take up a big portion of my summer Saturdays, which I didn't like. But anyway, in Italy, there is not much grass to be mowed. It's mostly urban. The places that I lived anyway were mostly urban, and so it's just apartment buildings and concrete, cement. There were parks, but I never was around them when they got mowed or anything. I never even saw them get mowed, to be honest. So yeah, so this is like a year into my mission, and I'd never smelled cut grass until this day. So I had just gone by the movie theater and smelled that. Then later that day, I went by this, we rode our bikes past this park, and someone was mowing the lawn, which I'd never seen before in the whole year that I'd been there. And then I got the smell of fresh cut grass. And that made me, I spiraled. I was so homesick. I was so trunky that I didn't even know what to do with myself. It never happened before. And I found it was really hard to shake that. For days, I couldn't shake how homesick I was, how trunky I was. And I started, my mind started spiraling, like all the things that I missed and all that stuff. Well, once a week, missionaries have a day called P Day where they can email their families. You're not allowed to like call your mom or whatever during the week. In fact, you only can call your family twice throughout your entire, or 2 times a year, on Christmas and on Mother's Day is when you can call home to your family. Other than that, you have one day a week where you can email them. And so you go back and forth like that. So this week I emailed my mom and I told her how I was homesick and how bad things sucked and how I just wasn't happy and I wanted to be home and this and that. Just this big whiny letter, email. And so I send it off and then I have to wait a week for a response, right? So the whole week I'm like thinking through my head like, oh, what things is my mom gonna say? Like, what is she gonna, like, how's she gonna comfort me, kind of thing. And so a week goes by, P Day again, and I go check my email, and I don't have it, and I don't remember what exactly she said, but I remember it was really short. So I opened it and I saw how short it was. Like, what the heck? It's like, that's not, like, I want more than that. And again, I don't remember her exact words, but she pretty much just said, I'm sorry that you're having a hard time. I'm sure it's hard to do what you're doing, but put yourself in the shoes of any one of the people that you're teaching and imagine the hard things that they go through and see if you're really having that hard of a time. I was mad. I was so mad that she said that. Like, I was expecting a shoulder to cry on. I was expecting a comforting mother. But my mom is really great. She's an amazing woman, an amazing person. And that was exactly what I needed to hear. And not at first, like I said, I was really mad. But then I started, then I just like, oh well, let's see, it's my mom. She's probably right. So let me try to put myself in the shoes of one of the people that I'm teaching and imagine what their life is really like. So that's lesson number 2. And this is how it relates. And so these are the 2 people that I thought about. So a missionary, all you do all day, every day is you perform service, like you help people with things, and you teach. You invite people to learn more about the message that we have. And so 2 of the people that I taught were Desmond, he was from Nigeria, and Jonas, who was from Pakistan. And I went through, when my mom said that, I went through a bunch of the people that we were teaching, but these 2 particularly stuck out in my mind, and you'll see why. So anyway, so I'll just jump right into this. So first of all, this is 100% geographically accurate. So if you look at a map of the world and compare it to this, it's dead on. Took me a while to do this. The circles, the shapes for the countries, the border lines, I made sure to make those really perfect. Anyway, so all this is to represent is that, so here's Italy, right? So this is where I was at the time. And I met Desmond in Livorno, and I met Jonas in Piacenza, and I am from Idaho, right? So I just wanted to do some comparisons. So when you put yourself in someone else's shoes, you have to think about every aspect of their life and try to imagine what their life experience has been like and what their current situation is like and all that stuff. And I didn't want to take up too much time to go into everything that I analyzed with them, but just as a frame of reference, I came up with 4 things that I wanted to compare between my life, Desmond's life, and Jonas's life. So I want to talk about transportation, like how we all got to Italy. All these places are super far apart, and we all somehow met in Italy. They're long distances. So I want to talk about how we got there, how we physically got to Italy, and then employment, like what we were doing in Italy and how we survived, like what jobs we had and that kind of stuff. Family, is like what our family life is like me, I have a good mom, a good dad, lots of siblings that are supportive, all that stuff. So I have a really good family. And then, so their families, what are their families like? And then contact, like how often we can contact them and talk with them, and what's their relationship like with their family, where they can they send an email or call their mom and say, hey, I'm having a hard time. So contact, and then living conditions. So what our quality of life, what our living conditions were like in Italy while we were there. So for transportation, like I said, this is my fancy world map. So these blue lines are supposed to be water, like oceans, or the Mediterranean Sea in this case. And then I made a yellow line for desert. So anyway, so the distance that I had to travel from Idaho to Italy was approximately 5,428 miles. The distance that Desmond had to travel from Nigeria to Italy was about 4,188 miles. The distance that Jonas had to travel from Pakistan to Italy was 4,531 miles. So I actually traveled the longest distance, but the difference is that it was by airplane. So I flew from Idaho to Italy, to Milan, Italy, and I had a bunch of stops, but it was all arranged for me by my church. So I had to make no reservations. I didn't have to think about a thing. I just had to take my plane ticket and get on the right planes, and I got there. Desmond he hitchhiked. Okay, so this is not obviously a real world map. Look at a real world map and think to yourself what it would be like to hitchhike from Nigeria to Italy. Let me tell you, from his mouth, it was hell. And it was hard, and it was long, and it was more than I can imagine, more than I could comprehend. Desmond, so it was on foot. It was like getting in the back of a truck and riding as far as it went. It was whatever, By the way, between Nigeria, so Desmond's path was he went to Nigeria and then he stayed in Libya for some time. This is all the Sahara Desert between Nigeria and Libya. I don't know how he crossed it. I don't know how he probably went around it somehow, or maybe he went straight through it. I don't know what means he used to get through there, but he did. So somehow he hitchhiked from Nigeria to Libya, and then from Libya to get to Italy. This was really common. It's still common, I think. But they get these rafts, like these barges, with no motor, no anything. They pack people on these things like sardines, and they shove off, and they go wherever it will take them, and wherever it lands is probably better than where they came from. So that's what they sunk their hopes on. By the way, Desmond told me that he left with three boats total. So his boat and then two others. Only two boats made it. One of the boats capsized, it flipped over in the ocean, and every single person drowned. An entire boat full, maybe of people that he knew, just tipped over and sunk. There's nothing they could do about it. They didn't have any rescue gear. They didn't have any room left on their boats to save them. So imagine that scene. Imagine watching, I don't know how many people fit on, let's say 50. Imagine watching 50 people drown and there's nothing you can do to help them. And it could have been you. It could have been your boat that tipped over instead of theirs. He survived that, so he gets over here, lands in Italy somewhere, and meets me in Livorno. That's where we ended up living. Okay, so that was Desmond's transportation. That's how he physically got to Italy. Jonas, I knew Desmond a lot longer than Jonas, and we had more opportunities to speak. So I know his story more intimately than Jonas's. So I don't know how Jonas got to Italy, but I know he didn't fly. So he also hitchhiked. I know that he hitchhiked as well. I'll get into some of the things that happened with Jonas, but if you know anything about what has been happening in the Middle East since however long, 2000 or whatever, you know that getting from Pakistan, look at a world map again. Look at the path from Pakistan to Italy, and tell me an easy way to get there. It is through desert. It is through hostile environments. It is through terrorist infected countries. It is through some of the harshest terrain on Earth, some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, and hostile civilizations on Earth. And he went 4,500 miles, and Desmond went 4,200 miles. So that's our difference in transportation. So when I'm putting myself in the shoes of one of the people that I'm teaching, let's think about transportation. I flew there Desmond had to go across the Sahara Desert and then across the Mediterranean Ocean or the Mediterranean Sea in a dish, whatever you want to call it. Watch people drown, tons of people drown, while Jonas had to hitchhike through, through desert, through hostile environments. And so, did I really have it that bad? Did I have it that bad being in Italy, getting to Italy? No, I didn't have it bad at all. Compared to them, I didn't have it bad at all. Family. I have a mother and a father who are happily married. I have siblings who are awesome, who I'm on good terms with. We're friends. I have 6 siblings that I'm very close with. That's my family. And once a week, I didn't get to call them and stuff all the time, but I said, on my mission just because of the rules. But I knew that they were there, and they would send me emails almost every week, and they'd tell me that they supported me and they were curious what I was up to. So I had no doubt in my mind that I had family back home that loved me and that I could return to, and that when my 2 years was up, I was going home, and all was well. I didn't have a concern in the world about my life when I got home, and about my family being there and them being safe and well. Desmond, that is not the case. In Nigeria, when Desmond left Nigeria because of a civil war outbreak, there's a rebellion or something like that in his hometown, some kind of riots or something. Desmond had a father who had children with many women, and so he had tons and tons of brothers and sisters. I remember him telling me, tons of brothers and sisters. But when this thing broke out, I don't know what happened to his brothers and sisters, but I do know that both of his parents were killed in front of him. He was forced to watch. He and probably a bunch of his siblings were forced to watch his parents be murdered, executed in front of his eyes. That is why Desmond left. That's why Desmond would risk traveling across Africa through desert and through, hitchhiking, whatever, to get away from there, because that was what home was like to him. That was what my memory of home is: a loving family, a house, a warm house, food to eat, everything's good. Desmond's memory of home is parents getting murdered in front of him and his town being in flames or whatever. So now Desmond in Nigeria has not a single family contact. Desmond in Italy has no family contact at all anymore. No family to talk to, no family to hope to see again. Just had to run and get away from that terrible place. By the way, when Desmond got to Libya, the Libyan civil war broke out. So he traveled with one friend. I remember him telling me he traveled with one friend from Nigeria all the way to Libya. Could have been a childhood friend, I don't know. Could have been a survival buddy, keeping each other alive through all this hell. I don't know, but when the civil war in Libya broke out, he watched his friend die. He watched his friend get shot by one of the Libyan police, or I can't remember what. Watched his friend die. So the only person that he had on earth to maybe call family was also shot and killed in front of him. And then he had to go. Anyway, I didn't have it that bad. I didn't have it bad at all. Jonas left because of a similar situation. Jonas left. Jonas was a medical student at a university in Pakistan when a terrorist organization took over his city. And while he was in class, broke into his university and executed every single one of the professors. Okay, so imagine that. Imagine you're going to college. Imagine us in the United States, we're just going to school. Imagine these masked people with, all these weapons come in and take every one of your teachers and professors hostage and then execute them in front of you. Imagine what that would be like. Did I have it that bad? No. His family were farmers, and they used every cent that they had he was the oldest son. They gave it to him and they said, go somewhere. You can have a future. We can't. We're stuck here. We don't have enough money to save everybody, but you're the oldest son. Go create something for yourself. Get out of here. So he took who knows how much that was, and made his way through all of this stuff and made it to Italy, where I met him in Piacenza. Another important fact about Jonas is that he Pakistan at the time, and maybe still now, I don't know, it was punishable by death to convert religions. So if you were, he didn't, I'm not saying anything bad against Muslims or whatever, but he didn't believe in the Muslim faith, in Islam, and so he in Pakistan he couldn't do anything about that. He couldn't look into other religions. He couldn't change if he wanted to, or he could have been killed for it. So one of the reason that he was talking to us is because he wanted to learn about all the religions of the world. Now that he was in a place like Italy where there's freedom of religion, he was expanding his mind and asking as much as he could about every religion that he could find. And so so his family, though, so back to his family fled that city, whatever, got taken over, and they went to this agricultural community, maybe like the town I grew up in, like Melba, this really tiny place where they could start over, and they started a farm. And he said that he talked to them every once in a while, and that everything was okay, and that nobody in his family was killed, and that they'd started over in this little town, and that's where they were farming. We'd met Jonas 4 or 5 times. We'd had these conversations. He was a wonderful person to talk to, very intelligent and inspiring. And all of a sudden, he just disappeared off the face of the earth. We didn't know what happened, and I was super sad about that. I felt like I just lost a really close friend. And so for months, we'd go to his house, knock on his door. He wasn't home. He wouldn't answer his phone ever. So I think like 3 months went by with nothing, but I didn't give up on him. And so one day we went to his house and knocked on his door, and there he was. And I wanted to like yell and hug him. I missed him so bad. I missed his personality and he's just a good person. And so he told us that he had to leave. He left. He went back to Pakistan. That's why he was gone for a few months, because he heard news that his family, the little town that they had settled to farm, had been flooded. I don't know if a dam broke or something, or maybe there's a bunch of rain and the river rose or something, wiped out his family's farm. So his family, who had left a terrorist-occupied city to get away from that, started farming, and the same year that they started farming, everything was wiped out by a flood. And so Jonas had to go back there and help them and get them out of that. And then he came back when things were taken care of. His family made him. I don't think he would have left voluntarily. His family made him leave. I don't know. They made him leave for a better future, one that they couldn't see him or any of them having in Pakistan. And so I'm sure. And then Jonas had to move cities. I can't remember where he went, but he went somewhere else to pursue some opportunity, and I never saw him again. And I hope that he's doing well, and same with Desmond. So as far as family and contact with family goes, I don't have it that bad. I don't have it that bad at all. I didn't have it that bad at the time. We were all 3 in Italy, away from our families, but if you compare what happened to Desmond and Jonas to me, it doesn't compare. I did not have it that bad. Employment. So, as I mentioned, I didn't have to take care of a single thing with the flight reservations. Well, so missions are funded partially by the church and partially by the families of the missionary that is going on a mission. So I worked several summers and I earned some money. I didn't have enough to pay for my full mission, but I had several thousand that I'd saved up that I gave to my parents when I left, and that was to help pay for my missionary service. And then my parents every month gave, I think it was, however much every month to pay for my mission. But so that was how I essentially was employed in my time in Italy. But I didn't have to worry anyway. So that's how I was employed. So I didn't have to worry about anything. Desmond and Jonas, however, and by the way, in the church, my church takes care of all of like the legal documents of that too. So I have like a 2-year. It's called a permesso di soggiorno, and it's just permission to be in the country for 2 years as a missionary, to do missionary service. So I couldn't like have a job and work and stuff, but I could be there. So I didn't have to worry about my like legal documents or anything. I was taken care of. Desmond and Jonas, however, that was not the case. So Desmond had got there illegally, so he couldn't get documents if he wanted them, which means he couldn't have a real job, which means a lot of the people like that, like in that situation, will sell things on the street. They'll sell like little trinkets and things like that, or at stoplights, they'll come up to the window of the car, knock on your window, and try to sell you flowers or necklaces or whatever. That's all that they can do. A lot of train stations will have a bunch of people like that will they'll, like, if it rains, they'll all have umbrellas. They'll run out and try selling umbrellas, and so they find any way they can just to make a little bit of money. And so same with Jonas, he had to do the same thing. He couldn't get a real job, so it was whatever they could do. The cool thing though about people from these countries that were living there is that they took care of each other. So and by the way, they didn't speak Italian. I learned pretty quick to speak Italian, so I got by. They had a really hard time with that, and most of these people from these countries do. They have a hard time. They're first generation from their country, and and so they form all these little communities. So all these people from these different countries kind of get together and form communities in the same cities, and then take care of each other. So they'll form like their own little economies and just help each other out to survive. So that was our employment situation. Our living conditions, the church also took care of that. So they rented all these apartments for us in every city. So it was just me and one companion, always, or not always, but most of the time in whatever city I was serving in. And the church took care of it. So they paid the bills. So they kept the lights on. They paid the water. They paid the gas. They paid the rent. They paid every month. We had a little debit card that would just get charged. I can't remember how much. It wasn't very much. It was just enough to get groceries and pay for train tickets. And that's pretty much it. And so we had to have a budget. We had to budget really well and be careful not to go outside of that, or else we just didn't have any money to eat anymore. So that taught us some very valuable lessons. But we didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to worry about having money to eat or to do anything. The rent, the light, the power, the gas, everything was taken care of. My groceries were taken care of with that little card that just got charged every month. But for Desmond and Jonas, that was not the case. They would often, most of the people from these countries, and not just these countries, from all over the world, that are living in Italy under those similar circumstances, illegally, that they're just there, would live like sardines in these little apartments. And I mean like 20 people in an apartment, like packed in there, sleeping on top of each other. Those were their living conditions, because they would all just pool these pennies together that they made from doing their thing, whatever. And that was the only way they could afford to have a roof over their head, was to pool these little tiny bits of money together to have a roof over their heads. So me and my companion, or other missionaries, if we shared an apartment, we'd always have to share a room, but it was me and one other guy in one room. And we had a kitchen, we had usually a living room, 1 or 2 bathrooms, an extra room usually where we would like dry our clothes and stuff. We'd have furniture already in there, so we'd have beds, and we'd have desks, and we had drying racks for our clothes. They didn't have dryers there, by the way, most of the time. So you just would wash your clothes and then you'd hang it up on these dryer racks. So we had all the space in the world. So did I have it that bad? No, I didn't. In living condition, transportation, I did not have it bad at all. I had the best way I could have ever traveled, Italy, just flying. My family and my ability to contact my family, did I have it bad? No. Yeah, I was far away, but Desmond's family had unfortunately been killed. Jonas's family was stuck surviving, trying to farm. Our farm got flooded, had to go rescue him, and then they had to start all over again. So he's got all the concerns in the world about his family being okay. Even though he can contact them, sometimes he would call them on the phone and talk with them on the internet. But I didn't have it that bad. Employment, everything was taken care of for me. Even though I had to pay for some of it, my family had to take care of some of it. And the church took care of, actually distributing the funds. My ability to provide, everything was provided for me. Desmond and Jonas did not have the same situation. They had to struggle for every penny that they earned because they couldn't get real jobs because they weren't there legally. And then living conditions. I had these spacious apartments that were awesome. We'd complain about them. They weren't like super fancy, but they were great. They were enough for us. And we'd complain about them sometimes. These little things that were wrong with them, or if they were too small or whatever. But Desmond and Jonas, are you kidding me? They're packed in these, sleeping on top of other guys and women or whatever. They were just all these people and children. Just imagine having 5 little tiny babies and 20 adults in one apartment. What kind of living conditions are those? So when my mom asked me that question, and I started to think about some of the people that I was teaching with, like Desmond and Jonas, I was mad at myself, and I was sick with myself to think that I had written an email home saying that things were hard, and that I had it bad. And I'm so thankful that I have a great mother who would rebuke me and would say, "Sorry you feel that way. You don't have it that bad. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody that you're teaching and think about how bad they have it. And let me know if you still think you feel bad, if you're having a hard time." I'm so grateful that she taught me that. I'm also grateful that my dad, taught me to get up. Are you okay? Yeah, I guess I am okay. Okay, let's keep going. There's nothing to keep pouting about. You're fine. Get up and go. And so the countless times since then, since I got home from my mission and since I've just been an adult and been experiencing life in general, whenever I start getting down or I think things are tough, I go back to those two things. I go when something really bad happens, that sets me back financially or physically or whatever. I get an injury, or if I, like my transmission just went out on my truck recently. I had wrist surgery a few years ago. So, when things have happened to me and I think that I'm down and that I'm hit, I have a tree break over my head, I think I'm down for the count, or I think that I have it bad, I am reminded of that experience with my dad and that counsel from my mom. Every time I think that I get smacked to the ground, beat down by life, I think that story with my dad. Are you okay? And I think about it. Man, is my head broken? Is my body okay? Did I crash the tractor? Did I whatever? No, I guess not. I guess everything is okay. So let's dust off and keep going. And then when I think that I have it bad, in the same situation, I go back to what my mom said to me. Do you really think you have it that bad? Put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, somebody that's really suffering, and try to come back to me and tell me that you have it bad. I don't think you do. Now, this whole thing isn't meant to break you down and say, oh, you're not really struggling. You probably are. Things probably are hard for you, and things are sometimes hard for me. But these two stories and these two questions have really helped me push through things, hard times, and keep moving and dust myself off and just keep moving. And so, I don't know. I just hope that you learn something from these stories. I'm grateful to have had good parents that taught me these things. And the next time that you're down, the next time life beats you to your knees, the next time something goes wrong in your life and you think that everything's lost and everything's bad, ask yourself these two questions. Am I okay? Do a status check. Check every part of your life and think about if you're okay. And chances are you're going to find out that you are okay. And then when you come to that realization, you can dust yourself off and keep moving. And then the other question to ask yourself, do I really have it that bad? When you think that everything is bad, put yourself in the shoes of somebody else that is really suffering, and you'll quickly realize, as I did, that you probably really don't have it that bad. I put probably in parentheses because you may be Desmond or you may be Jonas, okay? You may actually be you may be in that really bad spot, but I know you can get out of it. And when you do, you'll be an inspiration to everyone, like Desmond and Jonas are to me today and will be forever. So again, the next time you're down, just ask yourself these two questions, and I promise that it'll help. It'll get you through it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you watched it all the way through. It's really important how all these things wrap together. If you like what you saw or you think that somebody else could really benefit from this information, please share this and get it out, because I believe that this message is powerful and will help lots of people. Thanks for watching. I'm Jake the Wilkins.